Welcome. We're here today for a SafeZone training. Before we get started, I'd like to let you know a little bit about what SafeZone is. SafeZone is a community program at the Kansas State University campus. It's a program that's been around for many years, but about 4 years ago, we expanded it. What SafeZone is providing an opportunity for community members to be able to have knowledge and information about the resources on campus and to be able to use their natural helping skills to be available to students, faculty, and staff on campus to let them know where they can get help when they need it. This is a preventive measure, and it's also part of community building, which is a very important part, I think, of the K-State campus. So SafeZone is designed to help individuals who are needing to find the resources, but we specifically focus on individuals who might be affected by violence in some way and the precursors to violence, most particularly any type of hateful act, any type of sexual assault or sexual violence, and particularly also for the GLBT community. That's for the gays, lesbians, transsexual, and bisexuals on our campus who in the past have felt like it really wasn't a safe place to go to talk to people. And this has been really the theme for safe zones across the country for many, many years. And we are very proud to be able to expand that with the support of the GLBT community on our campus and in our community to make this a safe place for everyone. So I welcome you to this SafeZone training. Our presentation today is on violence, nonviolence, and disability, and we have two wonderful presenters from the Disability Support Services office here on campus. We'll have Jacqueline Anderson and Jason Maceberg Tomlinson speaking, and Jason is going to start the talk for us today. And again, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Dory. Thank you. Well, we're glad to be here and talk about something that's close to our hearts. We work in disability support services, and we want to talk a little bit about violence and nonviolence, concentrate a little bit more on the nonviolence part of things and how we can work with people with disabilities. We're actually going to start, however, talking a little bit about defining violence and nonviolence, and then talk a little bit more about disability in regards to myths about disability, and then move into some statistics on disability and violence, who is at the greatest risk. Women with disabilities, we found, was a large population of folks who were experiencing violence with their disability as well. And then a little bit on how to help in practicing nonviolence every day. So first of all, let's get started on a definition of violence. And for this, we pulled it from UNESCO. And violence takes many forms and is understood differently in each country and among different cultures. While there is no universal accepted definition of violence, the World Health Organization has proposed the following as a working definition of violence. Violence is the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person, or against a group or community that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. Today we're going to focus a little bit more on the threatened or actual violence, as well as the likelihood of resulting in injury, psychological harm, and maldevelopment, and deprivation. There are some unique items that come up when it comes to talking about violence in regards to disability. Break this down into three main categories. One, there's the self-inflicted violence, which we definitely want to take in consideration. That's something that I think is sometimes forgotten. Interpersonal violence, which is our biggest area. We have verbal violence, emotional and psychological violence, very long-lasting effects there, as well as sexual violence and physical violence, deprivation and neglect. This comes up quite a bit, actually, when it comes to talking about violence in regards to disability. And finally, organized violence, which in regards to planned out violence, and kind of talks a little bit more about in regards to groups, against groups of people. So let's talk a little bit more now about what is nonviolence. A little bit more to read here. This is kind of a part out of UNESCO as well, and there's a nice statement here that I think really gets at talking about nonviolence and kind of fleshes out the definition a little bit. Proponents of nonviolence do not deny that conflict among human beings is inevitable, and they do not support submission to persecution, obedience to unjust authorities, or acceptance of conditions in which their own or others' human rights are violated. To those who argue that violence is a natural human response to feelings of threat or fear, or that humans are naturally capable of doing evil, they respond that human beings have just as naturally a unique capacity for reason and propensity to do good. Thus, violence and nonviolence are but two opposing ways of responding to conflict, and humans may choose to practice one or the other. So we're really going to focus on the other, our nonviolence way to go about things, and sometimes to help to heal the violence. I'm going to introduce Jacqueline now. Jacqueline is our Assistant Director in Disability Support Services, and she's going to talk a little bit more about statistics on violence, and she's really got all the information in the area. We need to grab a microphone. Oh. We're going to pause real quick. We need the box. Yeah. There we go. There we go.
I apologize. It's the first time I've ever dealt with something like this. Before we start talking about nonviolence and proactive steps you can take in regards to dealing with the disability community, we wanted to kind of point to violence and what's happening in our nation and even locally. As you can see on the PowerPoint, nationwide, almost 1.5 million acts of violent crimes a year. Now, when we're talking about violent crime, it's got several subcategories, including manslaughter, murder, robbery, assault, battery, rape. I believe those are the subcategories. The good news is that since 1994, violent crime rates have declined nationally, reaching their lowest level in 2005. They reached their lowest level. The bad news is Kansas is up 7%. So although violent crime seems to be declining in urban areas, rural areas are seeing more of it. Two of the biggest violent crimes that occur generally to women, of course, are rape. As you see, these are stats from 2006 in Kansas. 98% of rape victims were female, 94% of offenders were male. The one I really want to focus on is the third one, and that's that 80% of rapes happen in the home. And that's a lot of where the violence against people with disabilities occurs as well, which is why we included these stats. And knowing the rapist almost 80% of the time. Moving away from rape and towards domestic violence stats, we have 71% of victims being female, 74% of domestic violence offenders are male. Again, 80% happening at home, and almost 24,000 offenses reported in Kansas in 2006. Bringing it home a little more, Riley County, last year, 221 violent crimes, including, you see there, 3 murders, 41 rapes, 18 robberies, 159 batteries. And I think what's important to note here, these are violent acts that were reported to law enforcement, not nearly what occurs.